I grew up in Ecuador, surrounded by the Andes and the Amazon, two of the most medicine-rich landscapes on Earth, and I had no idea. I grew up completely disconnected from that wisdom. To me, at the time, sacred plants were just drugs. That's what I was taught. That's how I was raised. And that wasn't an accident. Think about it. Generations of colonization, the Inquisition, the imposition of the church, all of it created shame around indigenous identity, around ancestral knowledge. So even though I was living in a country with living traditions that go back thousands of years ago, I had no relationship with any of it. I was surrounded by medicine and I just couldn't see it. So when I eventually found my way to sacred plants, I didn't come through lineage, I didn't come through ceremony. I came through curiosity and through honest searching and through books. After reading a book from ethnobotanist Terence McKenna, I started following his approach. His approach was go into a room, get everything you need, water, food, whatever, close the door, turn off the lights, and sit there. In darkness, in silence. And if the mind says, hey, maybe it's a good idea to go downstairs and grab an apple, whatever, no, just stay, be here. That became my practice. I wasn't partying with his medicines, I was letting them teach me. And I treated that seriously, even if I didn't have a word for what I was doing yet. And over time, something started building, a feeling like I couldn't quite explain, like an inner guidance, something quiet but steady, pulling me deeper into this path of the medicines of the earth. I didn't understand it fully, but I trusted it enough to keep going. I remember one of my first experiences. I was in Miami, I was in a public park, 3 grams of psilocybin mushrooms, 2 close friends, broad daylight, people everywhere. It's such a bad idea, they were laughing, having a great time, and I was in a fetal position. I wasn't having fun at all. I was having a confrontation. I was seeing things I didn't even know were inside of me. Limiting beliefs, religious dogma I've been trapped in for years, conflicts with my family that I buried so deep I forgot they were there. It was really uncomfortable. It was intense, but it was very real. And when it was over, I didn't feel broken. I felt, or crazy, I felt lighter. I felt clearer, more honest with myself than I've been in years, and that moment cracked something open. But it also left me with a question I just couldn't shake. Years passed after that experience and something shifted in me. I knew this wasn't a drug. I didn't fully understand what it was yet, but I knew there was something here worth exploring. There was something very healing from it. And at the time I didn't go find a shaman. I didn't even know what that was. I didn't book a retreat. I wasn't in any spiritual world yet. I was into psychology. I was reading, studying, trying to understand the mind. And on weekends, while most people my age at the time were out partying, I was alone. I was in nature, sitting in silence, doing my work, no facilitator, no ceremony, just me, silence, nature, and whatever the medicine wanted to show me. That was my phase of self-exploration. And during that time, alone, with no one guiding me, I learned something that I now consider one of the most important principles in this path. And that is, before you do anything, just anything, ask yourself, why? The intention behind what we do changes everything. And I'm not saying this in some abstract spiritual way. I mean practically. And think about it. You want to start a new project. And you might say, I want to make more money. Nothing wrong with that. But take a look a little bit deeper. Is that coming from fear, coming from comparison, from the feeling that you're behind, or from a feeling that you need to prove something to someone? If that's where it's coming from, the project might succeed, but it most likely will feel heavy, urgent, anxious, like pressure you can never relieve. Now imagine a different why. I want to build something meaningful. I want to serve. I want to express something true. That project might also require effort, for sure, but it won't feel like proving. It will feel more like alignment. The external action looks the same, but the internal posture is completely different. And over time, that internal posture determines whether something drains you or grows you. And it's the same thing with master plans. It's not the same thing to come to sit with these medicines because you're running from something versus coming because you're ready to look at something. It's not the same to come chasing intensity versus coming willing to be transformed. Now, I don't think there are bad reasons per se, but I do believe there are unclear ones. Coming because you're so disconnected from feeling that you chase intensity just to feel alive, I don't think that's the call. Coming because someone else did it and it looked cool, that's not a call, that's stimulation. A real call feels different. It feels like a threshold, an invitation to death and rebirth, the closing of a cycle and the opening of a new one. Letting go of something, letting go of the old so we can make space for something you can even see yet. When something in your life cannot keep going the same way, when you need clarity, when you're willing to look at your shadow, or when you have this feeling deep down in your bones that you don't want to keep running from yourself. I think that's where the real why begins. Here's something people miss. Working with master plans is not only an experience, it's a relationship. And a relationship requires clear intention. In the Andean cosmovision, there's a principle called Ayni, which is the principle of sacred reciprocity. It reminds us that nothing exists in isolation, that healing is not something we take, it's something we enter in exchange with. Reciprocity with the earth, with the plants, with people, with the lineage that came before us, and with our own inner world. So what sense does it make to start this relationship without intention? That's why I think the dieta exists, and the dieta is not only physical. Yes, we cleanse the body, reduce toxins, make the body lighter, but we also cleanse the mind, less screens, less noise, less constant dopamine, and more silence. And silence matters deeply. As the poet Rumi said, silence is the language of God. All else is poor translation. Clarity doesn't come through noise. It comes when we're quiet enough to hear ourselves. And in that silence, the real why reveals itself. But silence alone isn't enough. What you bring to that silence matters. And what you bring is your attention. There's a Zen story that has stayed with me for years. And the story is that a disciple asks his teacher, "What is the most important thing on the path?" And the teacher answers, "Attention." The disciple asks, "And after attention, what comes next?" And the teacher replies, "Attention." The disciple insists, "And beyond that?" And the teacher says, "Attention, attention, attention." Because awareness is the path. And I can tell you from experience, when you sit with these medicines, attention becomes everything. The medicines, they amplify your perception. It makes you incredibly sensitive. It heightens your awareness of your body, your thoughts, your surroundings. And in that state, presence becomes your anchor. When attention is steady, the experience flows. But when attention drifts, you get distracted, you might drop something, you might stumble, not as punishment, but as feedback, as a mirror. The medicine is always teaching, but only if you're paying attention. And I think that's why preparation matters, because preparation isn't only about what you eat, the diet, for example. It's about how you train your attention before you enter a ceremony. Silence becomes rehearsal, presence becomes practice, and self-inquiry becomes alignment. Think of it as like a first date. You don't show up messy, you don't show up distracted, you don't show up without presence. And believe me, you don't want to show up to a ceremony like that, because the medicine will show you, in a way you won't forget, how painful it is to be distracted, messy or not present. You come with respect, with intention, with humility. Not perfect, but open. And that willingness completely changes the depth of what you receive. Let me tell you what happened when my why finally became clear. Over the years, through several sessions with master plans, I started to see something I wasn't expecting. Like any other person, I had blocks, deep ones, resentments and frustrations specifically toward my mother that I didn't even know they were there. And that was intense, because we think we have a clear story about our family until we sit in silence and really look. But what changed wasn't my mother. What changed was my internal relationship with her. I began to see that many of the wounds I was carrying didn't begin with me. They were part of a chain, right? A story that came from before, from her own wounds, her own silences, from what she never had the chance to heal. And that also came from my grandmother and so on. And when I understood that, something naturally softened. It wasn't about justifying, it was about understanding. And from that understanding, compassion was born. Real compassion, real forgiveness. A forgiveness that allowed me to see her as a human being, with her own stories, her limitations, her imperfect love, but also with everything she lovingly gave me. She was a single mom, 3 children, and that forgiveness allowed me to love her for who she is, not for who I wanted her to be. Today I have a loving relationship with my mother. Is it perfect? No, but there's so much love, so much respect, so much support for each other that I think it's healthy. And that didn't happen because a ceremony did it for me. I think it happened because I was willing to look at what the medicine showed me without escaping. And then I was willing to do the work. After some of those experiences, I would pick up the phone and call her, and thanking her for everything she gave me, for the effort of raising 3 children, basically alone. I was making sure I told her I love her more often, making sure she felt seen, making sure she felt cared for. Nothing mystical, nothing dramatic, just honest love and appreciation from a son to his mother, the way she deserved. And there's something people say in these spaces, you've probably heard it before, but the medicine doesn't do the work. It shows you the work. But hearing that and understanding it are 2 way different things. And if you're not willing to do it, then your why still isn't clear. So if you're feeling that pull toward plant medicine, before you book a retreat, before you tell yourself you feel the call, just sit with this. If your answer is escape, just wait. If your answer is curiosity, intensity, something to check off a list, just wait. And trust me, it's worth waiting for the right reasons. But if your answer is responsibility, clarity, humility, and a willingness to look at your own shadow, then maybe you're ready. And you know that. Not me, not the facilitator, not the shaman, you. If you're wondering how to get that clarity, it's not something you force. It's something you cultivate. Start simple. Spend time in silence, no screens, no music, no distractions. Go for a walk in nature without a podcast or music. Bring a notebook and just sit down and write. Ask yourself, am I running from something? Am I chasing intensity? Am I trying to fill a void? Or am I ready to take responsibility? Give space for the answer to come. Don't rush it. Clarity doesn't arrive in noise. It arrives in silence and patience. As Rumi also said, listen to silence. It has so much to say. And if after a few honest moments with yourself, the feeling is still there, steady, calm, without anxiety, then I think that's a call. The medicine may open doors. The ceremony may create space, but your intention is what determines the direction. So take your time, build your relationship with yourself first. And when your why feels grounded and honest, I think that's where the path will meet you. I'm Gabriel, this is Sacred Seed. Thank you for watching. And if you want to keep exploring this together, just subscribe. There's a lot more coming, and I'll see you in the next one.